Hey, what's up, Street Talks? This is Eric Kim from the Eric Kim Street Photography blog. So I wanted to make a quick video about using a Leica M9 for street photography. I travel a lot, I do a lot of these workshops, meet a lot of Leica M9 users who are really frustrated on how to use this camera for street photography because most street photographers I know who get an M9 usually come from getting a DSLR or something like that. So going from a DSLR to digital rangefinder, of course, is a huge jump. So I just wanted to make a quick video, just based on my personal experiences, what I find typically works best, at least when shooting street photography with like M9. Of course, these are not rules. I mean, they're just kind of guidelines. What works well for me, of course, may not work well for you, but still somebody who's just, might just got an M9 just right out of the box, and you're like, nice camera, but how do I use it? This might be like a nice little primer. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is in terms of shooting street photography is learning how to zone focus. So what is zone focusing? Well, I'll show you. So if you look here on the lens, of course, you have all these numbers down here. You're like, what does this all mean? And for your reference, I'm using a 35 f2 Summicron lens. Um, and of course, when you change your focusing, you have all these numbers here. So pretty much the concept is when you're shooting street photography, the best way to shoot street photography is using zone focusing, because in street photography everything happens so quickly is that oftentimes I see a lot of street photographers trying to focus and just taking forever to focus before they actually click the photo. And so by pre-focusing and spending too much time doing that, you're going to miss the decisive moment. So generally speaking, what zone focusing is choosing a relatively high f-stop, so like f8, f11, f16, and having a really deep depth of field, pre-focusing your lens to a certain distance, generally speaking how far away you are from your subject when you're shooting street photography, and keeping your ISO relatively high because you want a fast shutter speed to capture the action. Generally speaking, I like to keep my shutter speed, try to get it at around 2/50ths of a second to capture the motion. And I'll just kind of show you how I typically like to do it on the M9. So the first thing I'll typically do is, of course, adjust my aperture. So nowadays, I just prefer keeping it at f8, f11. F16 is okay too, but it just depends on how bright it is. If it's super bright, I'll just keep it f16. And the second thing you want to do, of course, is pre-focus your lens. So generally speaking, I almost always keep my lens pre-focused at 1.2 meters. If you guys also have a Leica lens, of course, using your left finger, your left index finger to focus. This is what you want to learn, is just by feel, know what your focus is. So if your finger is dead center, like so, you'll know that your lens is exactly 1.2 meters. Also, if you know that if you rotate it 45 degrees to the right, then your focus is going to be at 5 meters. Likewise, if you turn it 45 degrees to the left, you'll know that you'll be at roughly around 0.75, 0.7, 0.8 meters. So learn how to, focus by feel. So let's say I'm shooting f16 at 1.2 meters. So the way you read this depth of scale, the depth of field scale, is that everything from f16, these are the marks here, and you see these are little lines right here. So it'll show you that if you're pre-focused at 1.2 meters, everything from roughly 0.8 meters all the way to 2 meters is going to be in focus. And of course, if you shift this a little bit more towards the right, if you're pre-focused at 2 meters, you can see everything from roughly 1.2 meters to close to infinity is going to be in focus. So generally speaking, when I'm shooting street photography, the only two focal lengths I keep it pre-focused to is generally 1.2 meters and 2 meters, because if the subject's really close to me, and the way you know how far 1.2 meters is, generally speaking, someone 2 arm lengths away is roughly 1.2 meters away. So what you want to do when you're shooting is, even before you take their photograph, you anticipate taking the photograph, and once you're about 1.2 meters, you just bring up your camera and click rather than bring up your camera and then trying to fumble with the focus. And the great thing about zone focusing is that you don't need, if you guys are using the rangefinder patch, you don't need it to line up exactly, because by having a high f-stop, you'll have a relatively deep depth of field. If somebody's a little bit further away, like roughly 3 or 5 meters away, that's kind of like half a room's distance away from you, then you'll just by feel shift this 45 degrees to the right and just take the photograph. Um, or if someone's really really close to you, then of course 45 degrees to the left, which will make your pre-focus around like 0.7, zero 0.8 meters. But generally speaking, if you're shooting at f16, you can see is that um, if you just pre-focus at 1.2 meters, it doesn't quite get to zero 0.7 meters, but most street photographers I know don't shoot that close anyways. So, generally speaking, if you're shooting street photography, at least with the 35 millimeter lens, you want to keep it dead center or 45 degrees to the right. So, which brings us to another selection question is, what lens should you use for street photography? Of course, it's kind of more of a personal decision. I personally like the 35 millimeter, and almost everyone else I know likes the 35 because it simulates the human eye. Is that with a 35 millimeter lens, it's not just, this right here, which is kind of like a 50 millimeter lens, but with a 35 millimeter lens, it opens up the scene a little bit more, and it's roughly you can see your periphery. And the other lens that people like to use a lot is a 28. It gets it even wider. Most street photographers I know are comfortable using a 35. I personally find 50, Cartier-Bresson of course used a 50 and he created great images. However, 50 nowadays is, considering that modern day life is so cramped, 50 is often just too close. So opening up with a 35 is often better. Even Cartier-Bresson in his India series, he used mostly a 35. Um, and a 28, most street photographers who aren't very comfortable getting super close, I would say stay away from a 28 because it's pretty wide, especially if you wear glasses. To have a 28 millimeter lens on a rangefinder looking through it, it's hard to see the extreme ends of the viewfinder. So I recommend a 35 millimeter. I'm currently using the new 35 f2. I think it's the ideal lens for street photography because um, it's relatively light, it's very sharp, and it just handles very well. Also, another option is the 35 2.5 Sumerit. It's another great choice because if you're going to be shooting zone focusing, you're probably going to be shooting at f8, f16 anyway, so you don't need a super fast lens. I had a 35 1.4 Summilux for a while, and it was just way too heavy. And another thing about street photography, and I mean the reason you buy Leica is that it's light and it's compact. You don't want anything a lot heavier. Um, so that's zone focusing, and of course, when you're zone focusing, so let's step through it again. So you're going to be shooting at like f16, pre-focused to around 1.2 meters. Then what I like to do is keep it on A mode, which is this aperture priority mode. And when you're out shooting street photography, don't be afraid to crank up your ISO because after all, you bought full frame camera for a reason. So people are like, oh, I never want to put the ISO above 400, but even street photographers who shot film oftentimes push their film from like ISO 400 to like 800 at least or 1600 because once again you want a fast shutter speed. So generally speaking, when I'm shooting street photography during the day, you know, I usually keep it around like 1600 ISO, and I find that it looks fine at 1600. And once it starts getting dark, um, even cranking up to 2500 ISO, people are like, oh, I never want to use the M9 at a high ISO because it looks awful on the LCD screen. So something to note is that the LCD screen is not accurate, is that if you oftentimes bump up your ISO and you look at the image preview, you see all these little red speckles and you're like, oh, what is this? Um, to my understanding is that it doesn't actually apply the noise reduction in the LCD screen. So what you see is not what you get. So, um, you know, make your judgments based on after you upload to the computer. I personally think it was fine. Something else I'll show you guys. I learned it from a photographer named Brett, like a shooter in London. And this is actually the tip, is that changing your LCD preview to black and white is, you know, a little better representation of what the images will look like. So essentially all you have to do is put your camera into, okay, so you go back, you press set, then for compression you change it to DNG plus JPEG basic, and after that you press menu, and then what you want to do is go down to color saturation, change it to black and white, and in contrast you just change the contrast setting to high. And if you guys take a photograph, you will see the preview is, voila, kind of hard to see, but black and white. Um, One of the negative things about doing that is that oftentimes it makes your buffer a little bit slower because it's writing into JPEG and DNG. But I often think that it's a better way to if you're sitting down at a cafe looking at the images you shot during the day, it looks better to review it that way. Another thing I recommend everybody to do is turn off the LCD preview. So if you click menu, you scroll down, there's the auto review. Turn it off, as well as the auto power off. Things a lot of people complain about the M9 is that the battery life isn't that great. I found that if you turn off the auto review and you don't, always constantly look at your images, it'll last you a day. But oftentimes, if you keep the image preview on, it'll only last you like half a day or a third of a day. So a lot of M9 users I know carry around a lot of batteries. Personally, I've been able to get away with just not doing image preview, and it's, if you're shooting street photography, you don't want chimp, right? Like take the photo, look at the LCD screen, take the photo. This is how you miss the decisive moment. Um, let's see what else. Other options, of course. These are just mostly aesthetic. Is if you have an M9 and you want the M9P, of course you could do what I did, which is just putting black tape over the logos. I think that just covering up the logo is nice because having all black camera looks a little bit less professional and it draws less attention to you, which is oftentimes good in street photography. Also, if you guys are curious, the camera strap I'm using is the custom SLR strap. It's actually designed for DSLRs, but you see it just screws into this bottom plate down here. And when I'm out shooting street photography, you just let it hang here, and you're going to take a photo. You just bring it up and then take the photo. So it's really nice and easy and convenient to carry around. Um, you know, another, so it's really nice. And of course, sponsorship disclaimer is that they sponsor me, but I find it to be a fantastic strap. So if you're shooting with an M9, think about getting one of these. This is a custom SLR one. Black Rapid makes a great one too, but I kind of like the custom SLR one. Is that I believe this is made out of neoprene, so it's really nice and soft, and it hugs your shoulder pretty well. I like it. Also, a lot of people like to get accessories for the M9, so something that I got in the mail to test out is the thumbs up. So a lot of people I know like to get it. It's a fantastic thing. Um, the packaging is actually quite nice. You open it like this. Whoa! It's like a little jewel. It's almost it kind of reminds me of like something what Apple would do because they always spend a lot of attention on packing things. So this is it. Essentially, the concept is that a lot of people say that M9 isn't very ergonomic. So to have a little bit more control, they take one of these things and they attach it in the hot shoe. So let's slowly slide that in there. It's nice and snug. Okay. So you see that it attaches in the top, and it's quite nice. It's it just kind of gives you a little bit more control. I find it very comfortable when you're shooting with it, and it just kind of lets you hold it a lot more comfortably. The negative, of course, is it blocks your hot shoe. So I personally shoot with flash a lot, so it's not that great for me. But times where I'm not shooting flash, during the day when there's a lot of light, it's extremely comfortable to use. So if you guys aren't using flash a lot, I highly recommend getting one. They're really solid. Another option is this thing right here. It's called the Thumby, and it's another great option for guys who actually shoot with a flash and yet want a little bit more control and stability, similar to the Thumby, but or similar to the thumbs up. I just took it off without blocking the hot shoe. And the concept behind this is, take this and you outfit it here on the back. And the way that it actually holds is there's double-sided sticky tape. And before you guys say, oh, I don't want to attach this thing in my expensive camera with a piece of sticky tape, it's actually made by 3M. It's a very, very industrial level